Welcome to the Queries 1 participation project for the WVU K-12 education problem. In this project, we're going to look at how we can write queries to extract information from our database. To get started, I've downloaded and extracted the provided data files, and I've opened up the starter file in Access. In Access, when we want to create different types of objects, including queries, we go to the Create ribbon. Here you can see that there's two buttons related to queries. One's for the Query Wizard, the other one is Query Design. The Query Wizard takes care of some common situations, but if you have anything other than the most simple query, you're going to want to go to Query Design. For the queries that we cover in CS 101, just head straight to Query Design. When you click on Query Design, it's going to take you over to this window. There's a couple parts of it here. At the top, you're going to see any tables or queries that you're using as data sources for the query, including the relationship lines between them if you have multiple tables. Down at the bottom here, in this grid is where we're going to specify the fields that will show up in the results of our query, how we want to go and sort things. If we're going to do any statistical calculations like summing or counting, we'll do those down here too, as well as specifying criteria to go and filter our results. On the right side here is this Add Tables pane. In earlier versions of Access, this would come as its own pop-up window. But if we want to go and add the tables that we need to select our data from, or queries, we can do that using this pane. The other way we can do it is to go and just drag them over from the left side here. As you work through CS 101 queries, we're going to tell you in the question prompt for each query what data you need to display in the results. It's your responsibility to figure out where that data comes from. So the data, unless we're telling you otherwise, will always come from one of the tables that you have. But you have to know which one has the right piece of data. So as you get started with a new problem, it's worth spending the time looking at the instructions, normally in step 1, where we go and list for a starter database or for a homework assignment where we give you different data files, all of the different tables that they contain and what the fields are within those tables. That's going to give you an idea of where you need to start going to find the information. For our very first query here, this is going to be called Query 3A, based off of the step that it appears in the instructions. We're told we want to create a query to view information on each school. We need to list each school name, the county where it is located, and if it's closed. From looking at this database and designing it, I happen to know that all that data is in the schools table. So I just went and dragged schools over here onto the top half of the window. And you can see I have these fields here: school name, county, and closed. Those are the ones that I'm going to display as part of my query. There's a couple ways I can go and get them from up here to down here. One would be to actually go and use the grid, and like I could go to the table here, choose the drop down for what table I want, and then I can tell it that I want school name. Another way is just to double click on the field that I want to add to the grid, or I can go and drag it. And dragging is especially nice if you're trying to go and add things in a position other than the last spot. I can go and select a column and I can drag it around if I need to change the order that things appear in. If I have a column or a field here that I want to get rid of from the results, when I go and select it, notice I've got the down arrow here, I can press the delete key on my keyboard and it'll go away. Let's go and run this query to see how it looks like with the results. To go and run the query, here on Query Tools Design, there's this big Run button. And you can see here we have our school name, what county the school is located in, and whether or not it's closed. So for the schools that are closed, this little checkbox is checked. So like Mount Vernon Elementary and Volga Central Elementary in Barber County are both closed, so they both have this checkbox checked. To go back to Design View, if I need to tweak things any, I can go ahead and click the Design View button on the home ribbon that it took me to. For this query, we're in pretty good shape. Let's just double check that the number of records and fields that we have matches what the instructions tell us. For CS101 assignments, we're going to give you a hint that tells you how many records you should have in the results and how many fields you should have. This isn't necessarily a guarantee that you've done everything right, especially when it comes to stuff like sorting or calculate fields. It's possible that you've done things wrong, but the numbers are still going to match, but it's going to give you a pretty good idea if you're at least on the right track. So if we look down here at the bottom after we run the query, we can see we have 733 records, and that matches what we were told, and we can count 1, 2, 3 fields. So we're looking good. Let's go ahead and save this query, because we do need to save it before it's committed to the database. It's not like editing a record where that change is going to automatically be committed to the database and saved as part of the file as soon as we click out. I'll go ahead and click the Save button, and since this is in step 3A of the instructions, I'm going to call this Query 3A. And then once I've saved it, you can see there's this new Queries section here on our Objects pane that I can use to pull this query back up. I'm going to go ahead and close out of it. For our next query, let's go back to the Create ribbon and we'll click on Query Design again. We're told that we want to view annual statistics for each district, and we're supposed to create a query listing each school year, district, and dropout rate. Well, I happen to know that if we pull over the district statistics table, it has the name of the district, the school year, and the dropout rate. So we just need this one table, and I'm just going to double click on the fields to add them as they are listed in the instructions. So we'll do school year first, and then district, and dropout rate. Let's go ahead and run this. And we have 440 records and we have 3 fields, so that matches what we need in the instructions. But we have to sort the results. And when we say that we want you to go and sort results, that doesn't mean when you're viewing the results of the query to go and sort individual columns. We want you to do a sort that's going to be baked into the query itself. For that, we need to be in Design View. So the instructions telling me that we want to sort by school year in ascending order. So I'm going to go and click in the sort row here beneath school year, and there's a little drop down list I can choose from. I can sort in ascending, descending, or I can also just tell it that I don't want this to be sorted. We want to sort in ascending order according to the instructions. So let's go ahead and run this again. So we have all of our school years are sorted in order. But since we didn't specify any other sorts, they're just sort of random. There's no alphabetical order or any ordering with the dropout rate. But it is sorted by the school year, which is what we told it we wanted. Let's go ahead and save this query. And this query is going to be 3B. And we'll tell it OK. And we'll close out of this one. Let's get things set up for our next query by going back to the Create ribbon and clicking on Query Design. This query is going to be a little bit more complicated. The 2 queries that we have used so far have pulled all their data from one table. Sometimes you need to do that to go and get the information that you want, but as you're working with databases, what you're generally going to find is that you may pull together the results of multiple tables in one query. That allows you to go and connect completely different pieces of data by going through and following your relationships. That's what we're going to be doing here with this query. So we're supposed to view information on each school and their annual proficiency rates. We want to list each school name, the region it's located in, the school year, the number of students who took proficiency tests, the math proficiency rate, and the reading proficiency rate. So there's a couple different tables we're going to have to pull in here. I know that I can get school names from the schools table. So I'm going to grab that. For the number of students who took proficiency tests, the math proficiency rate, reading proficiency rate, and school year, I can grab that from school statistics. And you can see when I dragged school statistics over, it's gone and added that table, but it also has the relationship line that I configured in the relationships window. I can also go and draw relationship lines here between the different tables directly in this window. Any changes that I make here are not going to affect what's back in the main relationships window. I also need to go and grab the region. And I know the region is in districts. So let's go and add the individual fields that we want. I'm just going to resize this here a little bit so we can see everything better. So we want school name, region, school year, number of students who took proficiency tests, which is students tested, math proficiency rate, and the reading proficiency rate. And then we're told we want to sort by school name and then by school year, both in ascending order. When you sort on multiple fields in Access, it starts sorting them from the left and working the way to the right. So whatever field happens to be positioned on the left side, that's the one it's going to sort by first, assuming that it's actually being sorted, and then it's going to sort by anyone's working to the right. So you need to be kind of aware of the ordering of your fields if you're told to sort by a particular way. So I have both of these sorted here. Let's go and run our query, and we're supposed to get 5,361 records. And as you can see, that is not what we got. We got 294,855 records. We do have 6 fields though, so that part's right. If you look at these values, you see a lot of things are duplicated. We have this A.T. Allison Elementary School, and it's in a whole bunch of different regions in the state, but with the same number of students tested and the same proficiency scores. And that pattern sort of goes on here. Gilmer County High School is in Gilmer County. It's not in the Greenbrier Valley or in the Eastern Panhandle. What's going on here is we've created what's called a Cartesian product. If we head back to Design View, you can see that we have these 2 tables here with a relationship line between them. And then we have districts. And there is no relationship line between this and the rest of our tables. That is almost always a bad thing when you're working with databases. There are some cases where that's actually intentional. You want to do that to get a Cartesian product. But for the queries you're going to be working with CS101, you don't want to be seeing this. What's going on here is there's a table in the middle that we don't need to pull any fields from, but we do need it because it's going to provide the relationship lines to go and connect everything. The reason why we're getting all these other records is it's going through and working with every possible combination of the different regions that are listed with the different schools. We're going to have to bring in the district statistics table. And when we do that, you can see now we have relationship lines between school statistics and district statistics, and then district statistics and districts. So if I go and run the query now, I get 5,361 records, which is the correct number. So if you get huge numbers of records like that, chances are you're missing a table in your query. With all of our tables at least indirectly connected by these relationship lines, we're in good shape. Let's go ahead and save this query. This is going to be query 3C, and we'll click OK, and then we'll close it. So far, all the queries that we've looked at, we've built in Design View. Let me go ahead and actually open up that query 3C again in Design View here. Design View gives you a nice graphical interface for manipulating the query, but behind the scenes, Access is translating this graphical arrangement into what's called Structured Query Language, or SQL. And we can go to SQL View to go and see what the SQL, as it's commonly pronounced, looks like. So here we can see the underlying statement that's actually powering our query. And SQL is a common language used across all major relational databases. I can take an identical query and run it on a big commercial database, and it's going to do the exact same thing as it will here in Access. In some assignments, we will give you the SQL code to go and use for the query. You won't be asked to build the query in Design View. We're going to give you pre-built code to go and use. And let's see how that works. I'm going to close out of query 3C here. I want to go to the create ribbon, and I'm going to go to query design. If I don't add any tables to my query here, the view change is going to default to SQL view. I can always go to the drop down and choose it specifically. Here I'm given kind of the starter for a new query, and that's going to be the select statement. What I want to do is enter the query that is provided as part of the instructions. The easiest and best way to do that is to go and just copy and paste from the instructions. You can type it in manually if you'd like, but just be careful that you do things exactly as they are listed, because SQL is pretty unforgiving. I'm going to head over to the instructions and copy and paste things here myself. So here I have the instructions open up in my browser. I'm going to just highlight the query where I'm given that SQL code, and I'm going to right click and tell it to copy. Then I'm going to go back over to Access, and I'm going to highlight that select statement and get rid of it. And then I'll right click and tell it that I want to paste. And I can go ahead and run my query now. And if all goes well, your query should run exactly as it is given. You can see here we have 4 fields that are listed, and we have this school count field here where it's actually counting the number of schools in each of these districts in each year. We have 440 records and 4 fields, which is what's specified in the instructions. So we're in good shape. I'm going to go ahead and save this query as 3D. When you're given a query in the instructions, you should not make any modifications to it. Copy and paste the query exactly as it appears. I'm going to go ahead and close out of 3D now. Let's go ahead and get set up for query 3E. We'll go back to the create ribbon and go to query design. This one's going to be another SQL query, so I'm going to head over to SQL view. Here in the instructions, I'm going to copy the SQL code to my clipboard. So with it highlighted, I'm going to right click and tell it to copy, and we'll go back to Access. I'm going to get rid of the select statement, and then I'll right click and paste in my new query. I'm going to run this code, but when you run it here, I'm getting this enter parameter value box, and it's prompting me for school statistics.district. What this means is there is a field or something that we're going and referencing inside of this query that Access doesn't know where it's supposed to get that data from. So it's trying to go and display here for us from the select statement school statistics.district. So school statistics table, district field, but it can't find it. That's why it's asking us to go and enter that parameter value. Let's click cancel, and we're going to head over to design view. And if we take a look here, there's a couple things going on. Where it has school statistics.district, it's given it this expr1 prefix. That means it's an expression, and we're going to see how these work with calculated fields later on. But if we look in the school statistics table, we can see there's no field here called district. There is one, though, that's called managing district. So it seems kind of a safe bet that that's probably the field we want. What I'm going to do is drag managing district down here, and then I'll highlight and delete that expr1 school statistics.district. I'm going to try to run my query now. And it actually works this time. One common problem you'll see when using provided SQL code is that if you get that parameter value box, chances are because you didn't name things correctly when you were setting up a table or a field. Generally, if you go and take a look at that name, that's going to be where you need to go and look. That name is the part that Access couldn't figure out where that data was supposed to come from. So you should go and look at your table, or go, if that table name is correct, go and look at a field inside of it, make sure that the field name is correct, A lot of times what ends up happening is that if there are more complicated names for tables and fields, like we have school statistics, somebody might create that as school space statistics, or managing district as managing space district. Things need to be entered exactly as they are set up for the table. Otherwise, you're going to get that box. So make sure that you have the names match. If you named a table or a field wrong, go in, fix the name of the table or field. And that will go through and take care of it. In our case here, once we have gone and fixed things, I can go ahead and run this query, and we get 619 records, and we have 3 fields, which is what the instructions tell us we should have. So let's go ahead and save this as query 3E and click OK, and then we'll close out of it. We're ready to take a look at the analysis question for this project. So let's go and open the analysis questions table, and this is going to be question 4A. And we're asked if there are any noticeable patterns in the average 2018 to 2019 proficiency rates, and we're told that we should provide a possible explanation for any pattern. If we take a look at that query that we just created, query 3E, we can see that it has schools and it has the average proficiency rate. And the average proficiency rate is actually sorted here. So the ones with the higher value are, this is actually basically 83.8% here for Kenna Elementary. And we can see we've got the district and we have the school name. And if we look at, like the district here, the ones on the bottom, Raleigh, Fayette, those are in the very southern part of the state. But Braxton Central, Randolph's and Potomac Highlands, McDowell and Logan are southern West Virginia, but Marshall County is the northern Panhandle. Things are kind of all over the place here. There's not necessarily a real clear pattern when we look at the managing district. And in fact, some of the highest rated schools here are actually in the southern part of the state, including like Sherman Elementary in Boone County. Let's go and take a look at the school names. So we have an elementary school, have a high school, elementary, elementary. We have an elementary / high school, middle school, one that's a combination, elementary and high school, some middle schools, high school, bunch of high schools, some middle schools here, bunch of high schools throughout, as we're in like the 1/3 passage rate for proficiency. As we start getting to higher scores, though, we start to see the stuff is mostly elementary schools. We have some middle schools mixed in here every once in a while, but we're not really seeing high schools. And as we get into the very highest rates, these are pretty much all elementary schools. So that's a kind of a noticeable pattern here. The schools that tend to have the lowest proficiency rates are often middle and high schools. The ones that have the best rates are our elementary schools. So let's go head over and start to write that up. And so that's what I've written here, that elementary schools tend to have higher proficiency rates. High schools tend to be congregated around the lower end of the scale. And then since we were told that we should provide a possible explanation, I'm saying here it could be a case of students falling behind in their studies as they progress throughout the school system. Go ahead and click out of that record so it goes and saves it to the database. And we can close our analysis questions window. And I'm going to close query 3E. To wrap things up, we want to run the compact and repair database utility. If you're using Dropbox to sync your files and this file is in a location that's being synced by Dropbox, you might want to go and pause that, or OneDrive or some other file sync utility that you might be using if you do run into an error here. On the Database Tools ribbon, I'm going to click on Compact and Repair Database, and it went and did that without any error, so we're good to go. We want to go ahead and close out of Access and submit this participation project.